I just came across a very small creator exposing a very large creator, and I want to talk about it because I've been following this very large creator for years. And while I like the message and the sentiment of what he shares, I have always wondered if many of the stories are fabricated or there's a shred of truth in some of them, because this person is always the hero. Each day they seem to leave their house and encounter a new horrible situation in which they have to rescue someone or come to their aid. And this happens so incredibly frequently that it has left me with many question marks. And this particular video went super viral, and tens of thousands of people shared the same sentiment. And I know this large creator makes a lot of money on this platform and others, very large platforms, many brand deals. I'm wondering about integrity. If people were to find out that some of the stories were fabricated, would that make a difference? How important is it for this person to be telling very truthful stories? Because I came across another small creator who exposed this person's handwriting, and instead of fans or followers sending this person notes, it looks like he's writing them to himself. So I've never heard anything about this creator before. I actually thought I was maybe the only one who was questioning the integrity of some of these stories. So I'm just curious what you all think about whether it truly matters, whether the stories are real or not.
Well, this should be interesting, if not laughable. Donald Trump is expected to announce, maybe as early as today, a general framework to address healthcare costs. Basically a plan that would cancel out Obamacare, and it would be something akin to Trump Care. What is that going to be? He's been promising healthcare programs for years, and it was always 2 weeks from now we're going to have one. So now there is apparently going to be an announcement. What might he say in this announcement? Well, we kind of already know. He's already suggested the idea that, hey, instead of sending money to insurance companies, let's just send it to the people directly. Oh yeah, that's a fucking brilliant idea. You're not going to send it to insurance companies, so you're going to send it to the people who then have to pay the insurance companies. How does that help anything? It's not going to help anything. But Donald Trump knows he's in trouble right now. We're just about a month away from the subsidies being canceled and the world being in an uproar, the country being in an uproar, with a lot of people, tens of millions of people being kicked off healthcare. Something has to be done. And for whatever reason, Donald Trump just does not want to extend the subsidies even 1 year. So instead, he's going to try to distract by coming up with some brilliant idea. Well, you know Donald Trump. I know Donald Trump. What do you think the odds are that this is going to be a brilliant idea? Yeah, fucking zero. So we'll see how this shakes out. We'll see how the Republicans take to it, because I know America, the people of this country, are going to get fucked in the end, because that's just how Donald Trump does business.
Donald Trump has a Putin problem, again. And this one is going to cause Republicans to shy away from Donald Trump. See, last week, Donald Trump gave Ukraine a 28-point peace plan and said, hey, here's the peace deal between you and Russia. And since then, it's come to light that even as he put a 1-week deadline on them to accept it, or the United States is going to walk away, that this 28-point plan, Secretary of State Marco Rubio stole directly from Russian propaganda. Ukraine can't have a standing army over a certain size. Ukraine has to cede territory. Ukraine has to do this. Ukraine has to do that. Ukraine can't join NATO. Over and over and over again, it's restrictions on Ukraine as Russia is allowed to run free. And now, Republicans, they're done with Donald Trump's Putin problem. They're done with Donald Trump giving in to Putin's demands. Because a lot of these Republicans were raised in a time and era where Russia was the bad guy. Russia was the person that you fought. Russia was the person that you hated. And even though most of those things are still true, and rightly so, well, they're not willing to give in to Russia so easily. Not after the United States has spent billions of dollars in support for Ukraine. They're not just going to roll over and let Russia take over land. Russia dictate what NATO can and can't do. Let Russia dictate the size of Ukraine's army. So Donald Trump has a problem, and it's a Putin problem. And he has to decide whether he's going to give in and do what Putin wants, or if he's going to let Republican senators and congresspeople in the United States slip away from his grasp and truly make him a lame duck president.
What does it mean when the U.S. Department of Education, and at this point I use that term very loosely, removes healthcare, education, and social service degrees from a professional standing? Do you think it's funny that the Department of Education is telling education workers that they're not professionals? Let me go get my whiteboard and I'll show you. I should just get a permanent easel for this position. All right. Got a good seat? Got a pen? Amazing. Here we go. First, we're going to talk about immediate consequences. And I mean the immediate consequences other than making this administration look like the potatoes that they actually are. Number one, reduced access to federal loans. This is where the federal government's trying to save money and actually step out of and abdicating all responsibility for education. I know they don't like it in the first place, but nonetheless, here's what they want to do. They want to restrict how much you can borrow from the federal government at a better interest rate. Why do you ask? Well, they want to drive you to their friends. Stand by. Number two, it's going to increase private borrowing. You guessed it. That's how they're going to drive all the loans. Every kid that needs to borrow money, they're going to drive them all to private borrowing in order to make them pay a greater percentage of interest and flood that money into the hands of the billionaires waiting with open arms. I hate this kind of stuff. Number three, it's a deterrent. They want fewer and fewer workers going into the already overworked, overloaded professions of education, healthcare workers, and social services. Why does that make no sense whatsoever? And number four, if you choose to go into it, it is going to limit your career flexibility. Well, this one's easy. They want you stuck. They want you stuck in a career that they want to put you in when they want to put you in it. They want no options for you whatsoever because let's be honest, this is the MAGA mentality of the future, how we control everybody's workforce. Now that's just on the front end. Wait till you see what the future of the institutional changes looks like. Here we got institutional and cultural changes. This is the important list. If you remember anything, remember what I'm about to say here. Let's go. Number one, workforce shortages. Make no mistake about it, they want these disciplines, healthcare, education, social services, to break. This government does not want to be responsible for any sort of public good that is out there. They want to figure out how do we weaken the labor force so we then can reconstruct it, rebuild it in order to serve our image and, let's be honest, the economic bottom line. Number two, they're going to create pipeline issues. And no, that doesn't have anything to do with oil. All right, roll with me on this one. Once they have workforce shortages, they're going to develop pipeline issues, which means people within the community aren't going to be able to gain access to the things they actually need in healthcare, education, and social services. As those things start to crumble, the public is going to blame the wrong person. They're going to blame the person behind the desk at CIS. They're going to blame the teacher. They're going to blame the nurse. They're going to blame all of those people, and they're going to start to develop a cultural mentality that public systems like this aren't good. Guess where they're going to go, Alex? All the way to the private zone. And then you're going to get number three with institutional challenges. Once you break the system, you can get rid of the system. Once you prove to the public that the system and those working within it aren't doing the job that they need to be doing, never taking accountability for the complete and utter economic drain you have put upon those institutions, the public outrage will start to challenge the system altogether. That's why right now their fundamental goal is to destroy all unions. If you can destroy collective bargaining and workers' rights, it is much easier to dismantle, deregulate, and delegitimize the entire situation. We're just going to roll right back to 12? And finally, and most importantly, they're going to change the perception of their legitimacy. That last one, they've been trying to do it for years, but as everybody knows within any sort of vulnerable sector, that these are the individuals we rely on to get healthy, to get educated, to be taken care of in the wealthiest country in the world. If these are delegitimized, if we can point to them and say they're absolutely garbage institutions, the federal government can say, well, we don't want to pay for garbage, and we're going to start outsourcing it to all of our private partners so they can make billions off you while you serve their best interest and never, never, never get to have a mind of your own or a collective civil right and bargaining right mentality again. Is that what you're after?
The Democrats currently have a 14-point lead against the Republicans among registered voters nationally on the 2026 generic congressional ballot. They lead Republicans 55 to 41. When they were asked the question, when respondents to this poll were asked the question, if the 2026 election for Congress were held today, which party's candidate are you more likely to vote for in your district? 55% said Democrats, 41% said Republicans. Let me read a few more things from this poll. 39% of Americans blame the Democrats in Congress for the government shutdown. I read that and I'm like, that's odd. I was told that the polls showed the public blaming Republicans more for the government shutdown. But when you read a little further, it breaks it down more. So 39% of Americans blame Democrats, 34% blame President Trump, and 26% blame Republicans. So they wrote this up as more people blame Democrats. But when you take the people who blame Trump and blame congressional Republicans and add that together, you get 60%. So really, 60% of people blamed Trump or congressional Republicans, meaning 60% blamed Republicans, 39% blamed Democrats. Here's another one. President Trump's job approval rating among Americans, according to Marist, is down to 39%. This is down from 41% in September. This is in line with other recent polls. There was a new Reuters Ipsos poll that came out, I think, yesterday that shows Trump at only 38%. And the NBC News poll of a week or two ago had him at 36%. So he is firmly in the 30s now among many serious, reputable polling operations. Here's another one. 26% of Americans say they strongly approve of the job President Trump is doing. Look, we're getting down to, that's cult numbers. 26%. I mean, it's really only the cult that strongly approves of this guy. That's pretty much it. 48% strongly disapprove of the job he is doing as president. And on the issues, far and away, the most important issues to respondents to this poll was lowering prices. When asked about what is the most important issue to them, 57% said lowering prices. The second one was controlling immigration at 16%. And then everything else was in the single digits. Reducing crime, the Ukraine war, blah, 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 blah. So far and away, by 57%, lowering prices is the most important issue. And this is a problem for Trump because he created in the public's mind that he controls the price of goods and services in the economy. Of course, the president doesn't. It's a lot easier for a president to screw things up and make prices go up than it is to improve the economic climate and make prices come down. I mean, there's nothing directly that a president can do. A president doesn't directly control the price of anything. But he encouraged people to think that he did. Because he said, elect me and I will bring the price of everything down, especially groceries. Remember groceries? I'll bring the price of groceries down on day one.
If you've read the text poem that RFK Jr. wrote Olivia Nunzi when they were having whatever affair they were having, I'm going to give you a moment to finish throwing up, wipe your mouth, and then let's look at what it indicates. Number one, RFK Jr. has openly, publicly stated that he was on Jeffrey Epstein's plane. Why would he do that? To get out in front of being in the files. He wants to say, yeah, I'll own it publicly that I hung out with him, but that's all I did. Now let's look at that text poem and remember that he's 40 years older than her when he writes that. Does that sound like a man capable of doing some bad things with some younger girls? I think it certainly indicates that's possible at the very least, which might explain what the hell he's doing in the upper reaches of government. If they're able to blackmail him and he gets what he wants, this is how the Epstein files work. We know about you, so you will do what you're told, and meanwhile, we'll give you a position of power. It's a win-win. I'm saying it looks a lot like he's capable of that behavior. Secondly, RFK Jr. cheated on his second wife 37 times and said it was her fault. Regardless of what anybody thinks about infidelity, I know adult relationships can be hard, though I think that's pretty extreme. We all can imagine what it's like to go through that. The conversations, the finding out, the pain, the yelling, the tears, then a divorce. To go through that as an adult and not learn anything. To go through that as an adult and think at 70, yeah, I'm going to do that again with a 32-year-old. I'm going to blow up her life. Yes, she's an adult, made her decisions. She's responsible for them. But he, as a 70-year-old, is also capable of being, I know what these things do to a person's life, and didn't check himself at all. This is a man who takes no responsibility for his actions. This is a man who treats sex and women like a 13-year-old prep school kid bragging to his classmates about how he uses them, and he is in a position of power over the health of our children. You're goddamn right. I am disgusted and mad. It is not right that that man has power over us.
So we have watched as the relationship between Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene has precipitously declined over the course of weeks, culminating into a full break this past week and Greene ultimately announcing her resignation on Friday. But I don't think it goes unnoticed that Greene opted to resign instead of retire. So let's be clear, her decision to take that route undoubtedly screws Trump and Mike Johnson, because now the already razor slim margin in the House just got even smaller for the GOP. And Greene totally could have just chosen to retire. That means Mike Johnson would have been able to maintain his current margins, slim though they may be, until Greene left office. That would be in January of 2027. But instead of retiring, she resigned, meaning that until her seat is filled, Mike Johnson watches the House GOP margin shrink even more. And at a time when Republicans finally are starting to feel emboldened to do the unthinkable and defect from Trump, that is a headache that Johnson didn't want, but now has. But I actually think that this is indicative of a much larger and more pervasive problem in the GOP. And that's that Greene felt secure enough to do this in the first place. Remember, the reason that Trump seems so powerful, or has seemed so powerful up to now, is because he's been able to command total loyalty from his party. That everybody is petrified of crossing him or uttering an ill word of him. But think about what's happened in just the last couple of weeks. Republicans get absolutely demolished in the off-year elections, which are obviously viewed as a referendum on him. Then Trump watches as 427 lawmakers and all senators vote for the release of the Epstein files, which he's fallen over himself trying to suppress. And now you've got someone who used to be his most loyal foot soldier, and I mean that honestly, who's a bigger Trump fanatic than Marjorie Taylor Greene, come out and trash him before ultimately bailing on Congress and leaving Trump's party with one fewer seat of cushion in a chamber where Republicans can only afford to lose a couple of seats if they want to pass anything. The fact that all of this happened, and happened so quickly, is a very clear testament to the fact that Republicans are starting to view Trump as a lame duck president. I mean, hell, even Ted Cruz, who, like Greene, is a suck-up, but unlike Greene, doesn't have any populist appeal because he's just a hanger-on, even Ted Cruz didn't say no when he was asked about a 2028 run. That would have seemed unfathomable like a month ago, that anybody would feel comfortable enough to even humor the idea, certainly to humor it in public. And yet now, given how weak Trump is becoming, the fact that Cruz could give a somewhat normal, cagey answer about running in 2028 says more about Trump than it ever would about Ted Cruz. The problem for these Republicans, though, is that at this point, they've spent all their political capital tying themselves to Trump over the last couple of years. They sat idly by while he cut Medicaid from 17 million Americans, while he'll send premiums for those with ACA coverage surging in 2026, while he cut food stamps to the tune of $186 billion, while his trade war sent the cost of everything skyrocketing, while inflation's risen every month since March, and all the while, not a single Republican offered a single syllable against his construction of a $350 million ballroom, of encrusting the Oval Office in gold, of retrofitting a Qatari jet to the tune of $1 billion paid for by American taxpayers, buying a couple of Gulfstream jets for Kristi Noem, hosting a let them eat cake party at Mar-a-Lago, of deciding that he's owed $230 million from the U.S. Treasury because he was investigated and indicted for crimes that he literally committed. Not a single word. They hitched their wagon to Trump's because they were too chicken shit to speak out. And so now they get to own everything that's happening. You don't get to distance yourself from the president who you enabled and who you emboldened just because you recognize now that his actions are politically inconvenient. That's a lesson that Republicans in Virginia and New Jersey and Georgia and Maine and California all learned the hard way a couple of weeks ago. The punishment that's going to be dealt by Americans over the next couple of cycles will be the result of Trump, yes, but will fall on the shoulders of the Republicans who enabled him. So look, now comes the delicate dance of not being complacent while still recognizing that there is an opening for Democrats to capitalize off of Donald Trump's historic unpopularity. That means the left has to continue to be effective at showing that they are the party that will deliver affordability for Americans. Republicans are going to try to parrot the same thing, but it'll fall flat because they already ran on it in 2024. They convinced the whole country that they would do it, and now look at us. Prices are higher for everything. Rent is more unaffordable than before. Housing's more unaffordable than before. Groceries, that old-fashioned word groceries, those are more unaffordable than before. And what's worse, there are no Democrats in power at the federal level to even serve as a scapegoat for Republicans to point to. They don't get to say, oh, well, it's the fault of the Democratic majority in the House. No, Democrats are in the minority everywhere, meaning Republicans own everything that is happening. And that includes the rising prices and failure to deliver on their campaign promises. So they've gotten their chance and they blew it. Now it's up to the Democrats to run the kind of campaigns that were successful in New York and New Jersey and Virginia and replicate those across the country. We're off to a good start, and Trump's evident weakness is helping things along.